Hey, this is Brian Slagel from Metal Blade Records, and this is Antihero Online.
All right, so the big thing that we're here to talk about today is the release of your book, For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records. What made you want to write a book about the history of your label?
Well, people have been bugging me for a while to write a book, and I was always like, that's what you do when you get really old, or, whatever. I just glad I wasn't into it. But we're sitting around starting to think about what we should do for our 35th anniversary. I mean, we've done kind of almost everything. We kind of thought, well, maybe a book would be a good idea for the 35th anniversary. So I'm like, all right, fine, let's do a book. It kind of was the right time to tell the story, and I wanted to start telling the story before I started forgetting too many things. So it seemed like the timing was pretty good to do it.
And the book covers the entire history of the label, and I know there's a lot of details that people can find in the book, but there's some things that I kind of really wanted to touch on. The first thing that I really, really want to know is what influenced you to starting your own record label?
Well, I never did not go into it thinking I was going to start a record label. Really, I was, working in a record store, doing a fanzine, booking some shows in L.A., helping out the local radio station with a heavy metal show, all these various things. Excuse me, and there was a scene going on in L.A. at the time with local bands like, Motley Crue and Rat and Bitch and all this stuff. And, nobody really knew that this existed. It was such a cool scene, it kind of bothered me that nobody knew this was happening. There's no record companies, none of the majors could care about it, no press, nobody. And this was, years before computers and cell phones and all that sort of stuff. So really, the only way you could get people to pay attention was, I thought, to kind of put out a compilation album. And I was a huge fan of the new wave of British heavy metal, and kind of, they were doing compilations like Metal from Others and kind of that do-it-yourself independent attitude. So I thought, well, maybe I could put together an album. And as I worked at the record store, I talked to all the distributors that I was ordering the imports from and said, hey, if I put together an album of local LA heavy metal bands, would you sell me? I said, sure. So, all right, cool. So I went out and I started asking all the bands if you can, give me a track that you've recorded, I can put it on the record. And they all said yes. And then my friend Lars called me up and said, if I put together a band, can I be on your record? And I said, sure. And that ended up being Metallica. So it all went from there.
And that's kind of crazy that you have seen the full evolution and growth of one of the biggest and most iconic thrash and metal acts of all time in Metallica.
Yeah, it's really surreal because I was friends with Lars for a couple of years before the compilation came out. He's just moved to LA from Denmark, and he was also into new wave of British heavy metal and didn't think anybody in LA would know what was going on with it. And being in LA, it was just my other friend John Cornarens and I were the only two that knew anything about it. So meeting Lars was like, wow, we're fans of the same thing, and so we kind of bonded and hung out over that. And he used to always threaten to put together a band. He had a drum set in his bedroom that wasn't even put together, just sitting around. He's like, I'm going to start a band. He's like, yeah, sure you are, Lars. And if you would have told me then that he was going to put together a band that was going to become one of the biggest bands of all time, I would have said, you're absolutely out of your mind. No way that's going to happen.
How much of an honor for you was it to have Lars write the foreword to your book? And how did you even approach him when it came to that whole process?
Sure. Well, I hate asking those guys for anything. I'm still really good friends with them, and Lars and I are still good friends. And when I was putting together the book, somebody asked about the foreword, like who should write it. It's like, well, I really thought of Lars first because he was also there from the very beginning. And so I was hanging out with him, one night in New York, and I said, hey, I hate to ask you for this. And I know you got a new record coming out. You got a lot of stuff you got to do. So if you can't do this, it's no problem whatsoever. But I wanted to see if you wanted to write the foreword for the book. He said, no problem, I'm in. So I'm like, all right, awesome. So and he did. Really, number one, having him do it was cool enough. But then seeing what he wrote was really very, very humbling, and it was super cool on his part for sure.
You have seen the music genre and heavy music completely evolved over the years. How does it compare now to when you guys kind of just like broke onto the scene in the early 80s?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's really different, but also kind of the same. I think the spirit of the music and the scene and the fans are just like it always has been. Everybody still eats, breathes, and sleeps heavy metal, and it's totally into it. But obviously, everything surrounding it is totally different. With the internet and the easy access to listen to stuff. I mean, back when we first started out, you'd wait 2 weeks to get a cassette tape or an album in the mail from somebody about some new band or something. And now you can just, click on the internet and immediately hear it. And there's a whole worldwide community of people that, before I literally have to sit down, write a letter to my pen pals in Europe, stick it in an envelope, send it to Europe, which would take, 2 weeks, then wait another 2 weeks for them to send something back. So, that sort of thing is completely changed. But I think the spirit of it and the music itself, I don't think it's really made, I think it's still, in essence, what it's always been. The fans of the music is always there, but just the way people consume it and get to it and stuff, that's really the big thing that's changed, I think.
And with me, I do a lot of talking with bands and artists, but this is the first real time that I've had an opportunity to talk to a label executive and someone who has created something from a base foundation and built something huge from the ground up. And in my discussions with the artists, they feel that the digital age has its positives and minuses. And the plus side, that it helps the artists to be able to promote their music, get it out there to a lot more people, but at the same time, it makes it easily accessible to everyone, so everyone can release music now. Do you kind of see things the same way?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that it's there's good and bad with both of it. You're exactly right. Where the music is more readily available, and more people are listening to music now than ever before because it's so easy to do that. But yeah, you're exactly right. There's so many bands, and it's so difficult. I think the biggest problem we have in metal right now is the fact that we haven't seen any bands kind of come up from the ground floor and really break through. The only band I can really think of in the last maybe 10 years is Ghost. I mean, you've got Amon Amarth and Mastodon and Gojira and these other great bands, but they've been doing it for a long time. It's been a very slow build. And it's just hard to do that because there's so much noise and so many platforms and so many ways for people to listen to different things. And that makes it really, really difficult. And yeah, anybody with technology, anybody can go in and make a record or make a demo and release it and get it somehow heard. And that the quantity over quality in terms of that may not be the best thing. But I do think, though, the one positive thing moving forward with all this digital stuff is you're actually really finally starting to see people pay for music again. And that's a really big thing, all due to the streaming services where, look, 20 years ago, if I had $10, I had to figure out which one record I was going to buy. And now for $10, you can get pretty much every song you've ever wanted to listen to pretty much any time you want to listen to it. And we see it like on a daily basis, the next one day after the next, it's more money coming in, more money coming in, more money coming in. And it's starting to reach the artist now where it's starting to be real money for the artist. But for the first time in a long time, artists are going to be able to make a decent sum of money on the music side of things too, which I think is really exciting moving forward and good for everybody. How that's going to change everything, I'm not really sure. We'll have to see. Hopefully, it'll be for the better. But at least for the artists who've struggled for so long, it should be a little bit better for them. And
what do you think made the artist struggle so much through? Let's call it the CD era. The late 90s, early 2000s, to where the digital age wasn't really established yet and people still had to buy CDs. What do you think kind of attributed to the artists hurting during that time period?
Well, I think, metal just kind of, went underground. I mean, it started obviously with the grunge scene coming up, and I mean, really at that point, metal was kind of a parody of itself, where they got really big, and all these people were involved in it, didn't know anything about the music, and promoting really awful bands, and it just kind of became, like I said, a parody of itself. And grunge came in and kind of wiped all that stuff off the map and forced it to kind of go back underground. And throughout the '90s, the '90s are interesting because for us, we actually did pretty well in the '90s. We had 6 Feet Under, Cannibal Corpse, Guar, King Diamond, Merciful Fate, all releasing really good records and selling a lot of copies of records, especially from the underground at that time. But there was no mainstream. It was, if there was any mainstream, it was that whole new metal thing, which we didn't get involved with. So it was a real struggle for a lot of bands through the '90s. And some of them made it through, and some of them didn't. But I will tell people though that there's kind of interesting because the 90s are kind of a big thing now. It's like, just talking about the 90s and all the retro and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of really great metal records that came out in the 90s that people just don't realize. Like, since King Diamond's kind of had his big renaissance the last few years, I get people coming up and talking to me all the time saying, man, I just listened to that album Voodoo. I had no idea how good that was. And I go, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good music that came out in the underground in the 90s that I always encourage people to go back and listen to. But, yeah, it was a struggle because, people, I mean, look, in 1997, I think it was, a lot of people thought metal was just dead. Rock Hard, the famous German heavy metal magazine that's been around forever, they had a cover with a tombstone on it that said heavy metal, born 1969, died 1997. So, but like one of the preeminent magazines of metal in the world says that it's dead. It's a little scary, but thankfully, everything kind of came back around. But yeah, that was a tough time for a lot of people, for sure.
I think one of the big problems, especially now in the newer age, in the 2010s to now, is the fact that a lot of the bands that have been around, or a lot of the bands that are just coming up, they're starting to lose their creativity, and they're kind of like conforming. And metal and rock are kind of like losing its identity as we go down the line.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that this is the one thing I tell all young bands. Like, it's okay to have influences and like your influences, but don't sound like them. Like, if you love the Black Dahlia Murder, don't sound like them. And we get so much, so many of the demos and stuff we get now. It's like somebody sounds like Cannibal Corpse, Metallica, Black Dahlia. Pick your band, Overkill, whoever it is. All these bands sound similar to those bands, and you're right. We need more things to come along that have a unique and different sound. I mean, I know people are very polarized about Ghost, but obviously they started with us on the first record. I absolutely love them and think it's amazing because, they brought in something a little bit different. It was definitely a very, late 70s, early 80s vibe with super heavy music, with very melodic vocals and this whole crazy stage show and stage presence and stuff. And that's what we need. We need different stuff, and that's what always excites me as a fan. I think we're getting there, because I'm hearing more new bands now that I'm excited about than I have in a long time, and a lot of them I think are kind of doing some different things. But to the point earlier, it's difficult for them to kind of cut through all the noise, and unfortunately, 95% of it out there is exactly what you say. It's just the same old,
There's nothing unique. There's nothing original about it. And then even too, when it comes to the live performances and the stage presence, it's either they're mimicking another band or they're just kind of lost when it comes to performing. And that was one of the things that I think that helped elevate Ghost to the level that they're at, is because they brought something unique and then they made it a complete show when you go and see them live, not just a band performing.
Totally. And, we kind of saw it when King Diamond came back around with this really huge stage show. He got paid a lot of money to do a couple of European festivals, and smartly for him, he took all that money and put it into a big show. And so that's really elevated a lot of bands. Like another band on our label, Almada Mars, has really elevated their show now, where they have a lot of stuff going on, and they've really improved how they are live. And I'm hoping that that's going to start. I mean, we're starting to see more and more bands do that. But I think, and kids are excited by that. I mean, look at Rammstein. Rammstein doesn't sell a lot of records, but they can go anywhere in the world and sell out either arenas or stadiums because the show is so amazing and unique and different. And we need more and more of that, obviously, to make this stuff roll. I totally agree with you.
And what do you think the issue is when it comes to bands that are trying to put these live performances together on an epic scale? It might not just be like the financing that's holding them back. Could it be like a lack of creativity, or could it be something underlying that's a little bit deeper?
I mean, I hate to say this, and it's funny, I was hanging out with, Las Vegas today, and Slayer and Behemoth and Atlanta got playing here, and I was hanging out with Kerry King last night, and we were, because we often have these conversations where it's like, where are the new bands coming up? What's going on? And really a lot of it is just these bands are, I hate to say it, but they're lazy. Like, people don't want to go out and really pay their dues. I mean, when Metallica and Slayer and all these other bands started, I mean, they were touring in, vans or cars and sleeping on people's floors, but nobody cared. We love the music, and we're getting out there and playing our music, and that's all that matters. And, even then, like, when Motley Crue first started out, I mean, they had no money, but they would scrape together $20 and put together, some crazy stage antics, or, Lizzie Borden is another one that, would put together a big stage show with no money, just like, let's just find something interesting and make it work. And it kind of goes all the way back to, like, even Alice Cooper in the early days. And I think it's definitely part of it is the lack of creativity, but it just seems like a lot of bands, unfortunately, these days are just kind of lazy. They don't want to pay their dues. They want to be big and popular really quick. They don't want to, have to really, work to have a show or do something interesting on stage. And, we need that. It's kind of back to the 90s with a lot of those, some of the grunge bands that I've seen where we call them shoegazers. We just go to a show and they just be standing there looking at their shoes the whole time. It's like, how can you go on stage and play great music and not run around or do something,
Yeah. You don't feel the music, you just stand there and play it.
Exactly. I can't stand that. I mean, I think it's getting better. I see more bands trying to put on a show and be creative now, but there's still a lot too much of the other version.
And I mean, you got bands like In This Moment that are just really cutting through. They go through and they reevaluate their stage presence and their show every year to develop something bigger and better each time that they go on the stage.
Yep, and that's why they're successful. All the successful bands do that. You have to go up there and do something interesting and creative. And I think that there's so many bands doing big shows now with a lot of different production that does kind of spur everybody else on. It's like, hey, if these guys are doing this, we should do more of that,
Yeah, light a fire under their ass to get moving.
Let's hope so, yeah.
Since you're a record label executive, and I can ask you this question, one of the things that I interviewed Davey Suicide earlier this year, and they just recently got out of a bad record deal with their record label, and they feel like they kind of got screwed over, and from what I've seen and what I've read, they really did. But he made a statement saying that with the route that we're going and the way that we're pushing forward, the need for a record label really isn't even there anymore, and we're working our way to a point to where record labels won't exist. What are your feelings on that, and how do you feel that record labels help push artists to the next level?
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate. I always, you hear stories like that from other labels, and that's always bad because, being a label myself, I never want to hear that. I wish all the labels would treat their bands fairly and pay them and do things the right way. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case. But, while I think that he's saying that in the version of, he's a guy that just got screwed over, so of course they not want to have a record label any longer. I get that. But it's very difficult to do it on your own. I mean, Prince did it, and he went back to a label. So many different bands, big bands have tried to do that, even small bands have tried to do it. And what you get, if you have to have a good team together to make it work, because it is a business. And, I equate it to a car. If you've got four wheels on a car, and they're all moving in the same direction, that car is going to go really fast. So you have management, record label, lawyer, booking agent, and a band all on the same page. That band is more than likely going to be successful because everybody's on the same page and everybody's pushing this up a hill. And, with all those people, like with a record label, it's like you're not just getting, and it's definitely changed over the years. Like it used to be the record labels were the ones that kind of did everything for the bands. And, now I look at us as more like a service company, and not to sound too stupidly corporate, but, we try to build the band's brand up, and that the bigger the band's brand is, the more concert tickets they sell, the more merchandise they sell, the more music people will pay for as well. And, we have a huge social media team. We have people all over the world. We have a team of 27 people just within our label here, and then you equate that out to distributors and other people, and you've got about 150 people that are helping your band move forward. If you try to do it yourself, you're just going to have to go out and hire all these people, which is not easy to do. You can't just, 5 guys in a band. It's not going to, unfortunately, be super successful because you need to have all these other people around you, and you're competing with other bands that have all these people around you. I talked to some bands that have done, pledge music or crowdfunding campaigns, and it's done well for them, and they've made some money, but I asked them, would you do it again? Like, no, we had to pack all these albums, we're going to manufacture all this stuff, it's all this money, and it's a lot of work. Like, you don't really think it's going to be work, but it's a lot of work. So you do need this team of people around you, but also you need a team of good people around you, because almost every time there's a really good band, you go like, man, why did that band never become successful? Bad record label, bad management, bad booking. You have to take your pick of which of all of the above people that weren't doing right for the band, and that's why they weren't successful. So it's tricky and it's hard, but I do still think, record labels and all these other people bring a lot to the table to really help push the bands forward. But it's all got to be in a good, positive relationship.
And I just got two more questions for you. I don't want to tie you up too much longer. So the first one that I have is, we've noticed that, especially with radio play, and a lot of artists are struggling, even major bands are struggling with getting radio play unless it is either internet radio or streaming services and, custom-made channels and stuff like that. But the FM airwaves really don't broadcast newer music, metal, or rock anymore. It's more of just like alternative, poppy, rock type stuff. What do you think has attributed to that, to a lot of the radio stations only just choosing to play classic rock and early 2000s newer type stuff, and that's where the deadline is?
Yeah, look, radio's, I've been doing this for 35 years, and radio, mainstream radio's never really brought on to anything that we've done ever. So it hasn't really changed a lot for us necessarily. But these companies are all trying to make money, and it's all about profit, and they are going to make more money playing AC/DC and Metallica bands that people know than they are trying to develop something new. So I think that's a real big part of it, because it's, ultimately those are all businesses, and they have to do things the way they see fit. And it's also very consolidated now. You have, 2 or 3 companies owning all these radio stations, so they've kind of changed the way the format has gone, where it's very difficult to get a new band, even through active rock. And, that's kind of the way radio's always been. I don't know that it's changed a whole lot there. Clearly there was a bigger mainstream 10 or 15 years ago, and I think metal in general is not as mainstream as it was before. Now mainstream is pop, Beyonce and The Weeknd and Drake and whatever that stuff is. But hopefully the pendulum will eventually swing back to more rock and metal stuff. I hope. We'll have to see what happens. But, radio, though, has never, at least in my world, has never been a big player for us. It certainly has helped a lot of bands get to that next level, and I would love to see more radio play on terrestrial radio happening. But also that whole world is changing really quickly too. You have satellite radio, you have all these streaming services. Look, more people are discovering new music through streaming services, whether it's Apple or Spotify or any of the other ones than before. Like I mentioned before, in the hip hop and pop world, The Weeknd, the Chainsmokers, all of these bands broke not because of mainstream radio, but because they were on a huge playlist on these streaming services, and that's how people discovered it. So I think that whole scene is moving in a much different direction too. And I don't know, I'm not sure how big a player terrestrial radio is going to be in 4 or 5 years, especially if these services start to get into cars and other things. So it'll be interesting to see.
Oh, yeah. And this leads me to my last question. 35 years, you have seen so many trends come and go, so many things changed, so many things happened. You've worked with countless amazing artists that have single-handedly helped change music itself. What is your greatest moment in 35 years? What is your greatest memory?
Well, strangely enough, I really honestly think it was putting out that very first record. Because I never in a million years did I ever think I could ever do something like that. I was just a dumb 21-year-old kid, sitting in LA trying to help. And I'll never forget I was in the record store, and we had all these 2,500 copies of this record delivered to the store to be shipped out. I just remember sitting there and looking at this and opening the box and pulling out a record and going like, wow, I actually made a record. I never thought I could do something like that. It was really a totally surreal moment, being a huge fan of something, and that just doing that very first record and kind of, just not knowing anything about anything, what to do, and just able to somehow figure it out and make it work. I mean, honestly, that's probably my fondest memory of just like, wow, I actually did this. And then obviously everything came after that.
The album that helped single-handedly change the face of metal, right there.
Yeah, whatever little role I played, it the right place at the right time. But yeah, it was cool for sure.
That's pretty much everything that I have. Is there anything that you would like to add that I didn't touch on?
Only just, thanks to you and, everybody listening to this and all the fans out there for all the support over 35 years. I mean, we could never have done this without everybody helping us out there. So just a lot of appreciation, gratitude from me for helping us along the road all these years. So the book, For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records, comes out August 29th through BMG Books. So you'll be able to get it in every bookstore. It's online on Amazon, on iTunes, on anywhere, pretty much anywhere you could buy a book or even the digital version of the book. And if you go to metalblade.com, we have a big pre-order for the book where there's you can get the book, you can get an autographed book. We did a cassette tape of like 13 of the history of Metal Blade songs, and there's a big thing that you can house the book in, and there's a T-shirt, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. So go to metalblade.com and read about all the Metal Blade stuff, but you can also get the book there. And then on August 29th, it will be available pretty much anywhere you can get a book at.